The story opens with a sharp hook, the kind meant to pull in viewers who stumble across the video on a late-night scroll. The narrator sets the tone by asking what country they're watching from and reminding them to like and subscribe for more drama. It frames the tale as another wild run-in with a neighborhood power structure that barely understands its own rules. The setting is a quiet lakeside community that looks peaceful from the outside, but hides a simmering tension underneath its manicured surface. The lake is the prize of the neighborhood. Every homeowner receives equal access, something people brag about when they're trying to sell their property. Boats line the shore in the warmer months, and residents take pride in keeping the whole place looking polished. The narrator has lived here for years and treats the lake as a weekend escape. His boat is larger than average, but it fits within the HOA guidelines, which he checked carefully before buying it. It's clean, well-kept, and docked exactly where he's supposed to keep it. Then enters the one person who seems determined to turn the calm water into a battlefield. She is known as the unofficial enforcer of everything the HOA stands for. Even without a title, she acts like she owns the rulebook. She carries herself with the certainty of someone who expects the world to rearrange itself on command. Around the neighborhood, people call her Karen of the Lake, though never to her face. She has developed a habit of policing anything that looks different from the norm. A slightly tall mailbox, a garden bed that grows an inch too far, or a dog that barks twice in a row all trigger her sense of duty. It doesn't take long before she sets her eyes on the narrator's boat. From the moment she sees it, she decides it's a threat to the order she believes she maintains. She studies it from her yard with narrowed eyes, measuring it with a gaze that makes it clear she's hunting for a violation. Her mission grows more intense when a few neighbors mention how impressive the boat looks. Attention directed anywhere but herself seems to bother her. Her campaign begins with subtle attempts to send a warning. Notes left on the narrator's door with neat handwriting, urging him to check the HOA handbook. Flyers in his mailbox about maintaining a visually harmonious waterfront. Each message feels like a nudge wrapped in forced politeness. He ignores them because he knows he has done nothing wrong. Weeks pass, and her frustration grows louder. Her next step is to corner members of the HOA board. She approaches them during morning walks and evening strolls, repeating the claim that the boat is too large for the community. She insists it throws off the balance of the shoreline, ruins the look of the neighborhood, and may even be a safety issue. She frames it as a disaster waiting to happen. The board listens politely but doesn't act, especially since the narrator's paperwork is perfectly aligned with the rules. But Karen isn't someone who gives up. She escalates. She takes pictures of the boat at different times of day. She measures shadows and angles, claiming the size changes depending on where the sun is. She gathers a small circle of neighbors who are more interested in avoiding drama than disagreeing with her. Every day, she grows more convinced that she alone must restore order. The narrator doesn't realize how far she plans to take this until a tow truck backs down the neighborhood road early one Saturday morning. The hum of the engine breaks the quiet, and a few neighbors step outside to see what's happening. The truck driver looks confused, holding paperwork with incomplete details. All he knows is that someone from the HOA called in a removal order for a boat that violated community standards. The narrator walks out just in time to see Karen standing on her lawn, arms crossed, waiting for the spectacle she created. She isn't hiding what she did. She seems proud of it. She believes she's finally caught him off guard, finally proven her authority. But the plan collapses when the tow truck driver asks for proper authorization. Karen scrambles, insisting she is acting on behalf of the HOA. The board members quickly show up after receiving frantic calls. They deny having any knowledge of her request. The driver shakes his head and gets back in the truck, leaving Karen alone in the middle of the road while the neighborhood watches. For a moment, there is silence. She expected victory and instead receives embarrassment. Her face turns rigid, and frustration pulses through her voice as she insists the issue is not over. She promises she will fix it, even if she has to take control of the lake herself. The narrator realizes this isn't just an argument about a boat, it's the start of something bigger. Karen isn't walking away. She's planning her next move, and whatever it is, she won't hold back. The chapter closes as the narrator looks out over the water, knowing the conflict is far from over and bracing for the fight she intends to start. The fallout from the failed towing attempt settled over the neighborhood like heavy cloud cover. Word spread quickly, carried through morning dog walks, late evening porch chatter, and the constant scroll of the community group chat. By sunrise, everyone knew Karen had tried to haul away a boat that sat completely within the rules. What she hadn't expected was how many people were quietly frustrated with her long before any of this happened. Her crusade against the boat had become the spark people were waiting for. That morning, the lake was calm, reflecting the tall pines around it. The storyteller stepped out to check the mooring lines, still annoyed, but more determined than ever. The boat wasn't just a hobby. It was hours of saved money, careful planning, and personal pride. Seeing it targeted by someone who simply wanted control over everything lit a fire that wasn't going to burn out anytime soon. A slow stream of neighbors approached throughout the day, offering quiet support. They explained how Karen had been pushing new limits for months, policing holiday decorations, measuring trash can placements, and sending warning letters over lawn height while ignoring her own landscaping. Her attempt to tow the boat had reminded everyone of the common enemy they had been tolerating. People were tired of it. They just needed someone to stand their ground first. By afternoon, Karen launched her counterattack in the form of an emergency HOA board meeting. She framed it as a necessary order and safety review, though everyone knew it was about reclaiming her image. She posted reminders across every community channel, encouraging people to attend and protect the standards of the lake. She believed she had more influence than she actually did. For the first time, she was about to learn how thin her support really was. As the meeting began, homeowners trickled into the clubhouse. The storyteller arrived early, wanting to avoid any appearance of hiding. Karen walked in shortly after, holding a stack of printed screenshots and maps. Her expression was locked into a tense smile, the kind that came from trying to pretend the situation hadn't slipped beyond her control. The board took their seats, already exhausted by the escalating drama. They had dealt with complaints before, but never something bold enough to require towing paperwork. Karen believed she could steer the conversation back in her favor, but most people had come to hear the full story. They weren't interested in another lecture about the color of mailboxes or the angle of garden lights. As the meeting progressed, more homeowners spoke up than expected. They described months of nitpicking, unfair citations, and inconsistent rule enforcement. The boat incident had opened the door for them to let everything out. Karen's expression tightened as each person criticized her approach. She tried to keep control, but it was slipping like sand through her fingers. When it was finally time for the storyteller to explain their side, the room grew quiet. The facts were simple. The boat was registered, stored correctly, and fully allowed under the HOA guidelines. The attempt to tow it had been done without proper authority, without required notice, and without any legitimate cause. The board members exchanged glances, realizing they might be dealing with more than a minor power dispute. The meeting ended with tension hanging in the air. The board promised to review the situation in detail and return with a decision. Karen hurried out, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. She understood she had lost control of the narrative, but she had no intention of giving up. People like her never back down quietly. That evening, the storyteller watched the lake settle under a fading sunset, knowing the next phase of the conflict was coming soon. Karen had stirred the entire neighborhood, and she wouldn't sit still after a public blow like that. The calm water gave no hint of the storm forming beneath the surface. The moment the board announced their decision would change everything, and it would create the very opening needed to remove Karen's grip on the lake once and for all. The final chapter opens with the lake sitting in an uneasy calm, carrying the weight of everything that had happened over the past week. The confrontation with Marlene had echoed through the entire neighborhood, and people who once stayed quiet were now speaking openly about how far the HOA leadership had gone. Word traveled fast, reaching even the longtime residents who normally avoided conflict. They showed up at the edge of the water to see what would happen next, curious about whether the lake would return to what it used to be or turn into another battleground. The morning after the board's attempted takeover, the homeowner stepped onto the dock with a steady pace. He knew the lake was more than a backdrop. It was a personal project, a place he had cleaned, restored, and shared with neighbors long before the HOA tried to claim ownership. That history mattered now because people were finally asking questions they should have asked earlier. They wanted to understand where the line really stood. They wanted to know who the lake belonged to and why the HOA acted as if it owned everything in sight. More neighbors approached with their concerns. Some admitted they had sided with the HOA out of fear of fines. Others confessed they never liked how Marlene handled disputes but didn't want to be the target of her next crusade. The shift in tone created a rare sense of honesty, and the homeowner realized the power dynamics were changing in his favor. The lake, calm as it looked, had become the symbol of something bigger. It represented the right to stand up to someone who thrived on controlling small things. The HOA board called an emergency meeting on the community green. They framed it as a discussion, but everyone knew it was about saving face. The board members arrived with folders and highlighted bylaws, clearly trying to regain the authority they lost. Marlene appeared last, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Her posture, usually stiff and confident, looked smaller now. The tension hit before a word was spoken. The homeowner stepped forward and presented every document tied to the lake's history. He showed the restoration grants he earned, the land surveys, and the emails where he asked the community to enjoy the water long before the HOA even existed. The board had no ground left to stand on. Their claim that the lake counted as a shared recreational space was weak, and the paperwork proved it. With the crowd watching, the board's confidence thinned out fast. They exchanged quiet looks, realizing the situation was slipping from their control. When the homeowner made it clear the HOA members who tried to police the lake were no longer allowed to use it, the crowd responded with a sharp wave of surprise. Some nodded in support, others stood silent, absorbing the moment. The HOA attempted to negotiate, but the mood in the community had shifted too much. People were tired of being told what to do for problems that never existed. They were tired of enforcement masquerading as leadership. The homeowner stayed calm, reminding everyone that the lake was originally open to anyone who came with respect. What changed was not the rules. What changed was how the HOA tried to push their authority. The decision to remove their access wasn't revenge. It was a boundary finally being protected. News spread fast, and by the afternoon, the lake was clear of the usual HOA crew that used to camp out near the water. Their chairs were gone, their weekly gatherings ended, and even their loud debates disappeared. The quiet felt different this time. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful, like the lake had taken a breath after being held too long. Over the next few days, the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. With the board's influence weakened, residents began discussing what they actually wanted the community to look like. They talked about fairer policies, transparent decisions, and leaders who cared about real problems instead of imagined ones. The lake, once the center of conflict, became a place where people met to cool off, talk freely, and reconnect with what made the neighborhood pleasant before all the tension started. Marlene tried to gather support again, but her attempts to spark outrage fell flat. The neighbors had seen the full picture now, and they didn't want to return to the old cycle. She spent more time indoors, avoiding the places she once patrolled with certainty. Without the backing of the community, her influence evaporated. What remained was a reputation shaped by her own actions, and she could no longer control the narrative. The final evening of the chapter fades into a warm sunset, reflecting off the water. The homeowner sat on the edge of the dock, feeling the gentle movement of the lake beneath him. After everything, the place still brought the same sense of calm it always had. He thought about how quickly a simple argument over a boat had escalated, and how necessary it was to draw a line before things went any further. He didn't regret defending his property, and he didn't regret standing up to the HOA leadership. The community needed someone to say, enough.
and he happened to be the one who did it. As the sun lowered behind the trees, the chapter closes on the steady, quiet confidence that the lake was secure, the neighborhood was waking up, and the unnecessary battles were finally settled. The next chapter for the community wouldn't be written by rules or threats. It would be shaped by people who learned what can happen when a small problem grows beyond its limits and how important it is to protect the things that matter before they are taken away.